Everyone, and welcome back to the series of videos devoted to the first World Chess Championship match in history, the one held between Wilhelm Steinitz and Johannes Zukertort in 1886. In this video, we are going to analyze the very first game of the match in great detail. So let's dive deep into it. So, in the very first game of the match, Zukertort was the one who had the white pieces, while Steinitz had the black pieces. And we will be looking at all the games from Steinitz's perspective simply because he was the ultimate winner of the match. So in this game, White Zukertort opened with d4. He was mostly a d4 player throughout his life, and so this move was not a surprise from him. And for this match, after d5, c4, c6, this was what Steinitz prepared, so he was ready to play these setups with c6 that are the so-called Slav setups or Slav defense. And here Zukertort plays a very uncommon move. This move is the move e3. It is a logical move because on one hand it is, opening up the bishop and kind of protecting the c4 square. But from the modern viewpoint, it is not ideal move because this move locks in the bishop on c1, so now the bishop can no longer develop. Now this kind of playing with the move e3 in these Queen's Gambit systems was somewhat characteristic for Zukertort, and together with another player, Kole, he developed these systems and employed them, which is why they are nowadays known as Kole-Zukertort systems. However, objectively, it is not the most ambitious or critical way of playing, although, of course, it is still seen on all levels even today. And now, Black plays bishop to f5. It is a little bit non-standard. You would expect that the move knight to f6 would be played, but for the moment, Black is kind of delaying the development of this knight and also to a certain extent provoking White. We will see later in the match that the move knight f6 will make its appearance, and there might not be that much difference, but okay, bishop f5, it's still playable, and it was also seen on top level today. And now the point here is that if you go something like queen to b3, so usually when this bishop departs from c8, White can try to exploit the weakness of the b7 pawn and also somewhat the d5 pawn. However, here it is not a problem because you can play, for example, the move like queen c7 as Black, with the point that after c takes d5, c takes d5, your pawn on d5 is not really hanging because you are also attacking the bishop on c1. So yeah, there are some nuances because the knight is not on c3. I don't think there are that much groundbreaking nuances, and I would limit the opening discussion to minimum, as I'm also not too big of an expert, and besides, in 1886, these guys were the trailblazers of this variation, just like many others. So after knight to c3, continuing developing, e6, knight f3, both sides continue developing, and now after Black plays knight to d7. Still refraining from knight to f6, I don't know for which reason. I think knight f6 is perfectly reasonable move as well. And here Zukertort plays a first, let's say, move that's indication that of a time, so to speak. He plays the move a3. And with this move, he clearly indicates the intention to play the move c5 and then b4 and to kind of gain space on the queen side. However, the problem is that it will turn out, and this game is the best demonstration, that this space gaining aggression on the queen side is not at all so potent for White because it's really hard to break through. And in the meantime, as we will see in the game, once the queen side is locked, Black gets a lot of play with the help of this undermining move e5. So therefore, here it is better to maybe develop the bishop. Even bishop d3 is not that sensible, not that silly, because okay, you are exchanging one of your opponent's active pieces, and you can do so with a gain of tempo. For example, bishop d3, queen d3. Now queen comes into the play in one move. Definitely possible. Although maybe here Steinitz was, I don't know, intending to play with f5 to it. That's probably not too good, to be honest, but that's like usually that would be one of the reasons why you don't develop the knight on f6. But okay, a3 was played, and now bishop to d6, kind of inviting Zukertort to play c5, and sure enough, he plays c5, which, well, as again, this whole idea is probably not too good, because now after bishop c7, b4, yes, White has gained some space on the queen side, yes, they will play b5 at some point, but the question is, what next? That move doesn't even threaten anything, and in the meantime, you have to reckon that Black will play e5 themselves. So, by the way, this is how you can deduce here you take a look at the pawn chains, and then you see, okay, what are my pawn breaks in a position. In this position, black obviously has the pawn break e5, also some a5, b6, but out of the three, it is clear that the pawn break with e5 is the most sensible because it strikes at this particular point, and it activates some pieces, opens up the potential e file, or threatens to play e4 as happened in the game. And here Steinitz played it immediately. Maybe he could have waited and prepared it a little bit, sometimes executing plans, for example, developing first with knight f6 castles and then placing the rook might be more sensible. But after e5, white played bishop to e2. You could probably make an argument that taking on e5 was necessary in order not to allow what happened in the game. But after bishop to e2 and here knight f6, probably you should play e4 at once, but okay. Knight to f6. Bishop b2, once again ignoring the idea of taking on e5, probably because neither player fully realized how powerful Steinitz's next move is, and this move is the move e4. And this move is very powerful because it secures a lot of space on the king side, or in the center, kicks this knight away, and basically invites, opens up this bishop, for example, and secures a lot of space on this left-hand side of the board, which means that it will be very, very easy for black to create some attacking chances, as actually happens in the game. And here, after knight to d2, you can see that white has barely any pieces on this side of the board. They are all right from the e file, right? So on the other side, and this means that black can start playing on the king side. It looks a little bit strange to move your h pawn in a position like this, but this is very, very typical. You are gaining some space on the king side. You are potentially opening the file for the rook, so you can rook lift the rook via h6 to g6. You are controlling some g4 options, so maybe knight g4 or bishop g4 becomes a thing. And you are asking white, okay, show me what you got. And if white castles, for example, here it can get very, very dangerous very, very quickly. Actually, as a matter of fact, due to this move h5, bishop to h2, the standard Greek gift sacrifice works. If you are not familiar with this pattern, I will make a separate video sometime in the future probably, and there are many other videos on the internet. But without further ado, all the elements for the perfect Greek gift sacrifice are here, and yeah, this is just very, very dangerous for white. So this is why Zukertort played h3 here, preventing this option and also removing this attack, pawn from the potential attack, but still this move does weaken the king side somewhat, and here Steinitz played knight f8, intending to get the knight to h4 and to threaten to create some threats to the g2 pawn, which is now a target. And now white plays a4, intending to play for b5 very, very quickly, knight g6, b5, and now knight to h4. And this is a very, very amazing concept by Steinitz, because after the next move g3, which turns out to be a mistake, he already envisioned a very, very powerful sacrifice, knight g2, king f1, knight to e3, f takes e3, bishop to g3. And now we have to ask ourselves, okay, what exactly, why does this sacrifice work? Like, okay, we have obtained two pawns for a piece, but two pawns are usually not sufficient material. And that is true, but you have to observe the position. This pawn chain is severely restricting the opponent's pieces. These knights are all far away from the events on the king side. This bishop is completely dead because it's limited by the own pawn chain from e3 to c5, and white has very little space, so it is very difficult, for example, to transfer the pieces to the defense of the king. And of course the king is quite exposed here on f1, and to top it all, this pawn is also weak. So after king to g2, here actually Steinitz does make a small mistake. He does retreat the bishop with bishop c7 immediately. And okay, once again, this it's very tricky to analyze these positions with a modern engine, because of course it will emphasize several improvements. But here it was more sophisticated to play h4 first. And the idea here is that after knight to f1, you retreat the bishop, and then there is no queen to f1. And otherwise, your bishop is quite strong here on g3, severely restricting the pieces. Because after bishop c7, white could have played queen to f1, attacking this bishop. And the thing here is, if you try to naturally defend, for example, with queen d7, there is this nasty trick, b takes c6, b takes c6, knight to b5. And the problem is, if you take the knight, then this bishop takes b5 wins your queen. And otherwise, if you retreat the bishop, then knight d6 happens, and this bishop gets totally killed. And if you have to give up the bishop, then your attack is much less powerful, because you have this piece that's participating in the attack and this piece that is not participating in the defense. And what white manages to achieve here is they manage to exchange one of your attacking pieces for a piece that was not defending. So they reduce the total amount of the attackers, and this is clearly in their benefit. But Zukertort missed this opportunity, and this was actually the only chance for him to get back into the game. And now, instead, he played queen to g1, which is actually a losing mistake. Of course, it is natural to try to keep the f1 square for the king, and ideally, white would like to run the king all the way to, for example, c2, but that's not happening, because rook h6 now comes, and now we see another very strong point of the previous move, h5, a very typical idea. This is the so-called rook lift, when you lift the rook from the back rank to the 6th rank. And this turns out to be extremely strong. And here, after king to f1, rook g6 comes, and now we see that all these pieces are somehow shortened squares. And after queen to f2, we can simply play queen d7. This is, by the way, now attacking the bishop, but we play queen d7, and we are attacking the pawn. We are still preventing the king from escaping due to the bishop g3 idea, and this tactic with b takes c6 doesn't really work. So after b takes c6, b takes c6, knight b5 doesn't now work because of simple bishop to h3, and if king e1, you play bishop to g3, winning the queen. So with this configuration, with the king on f1 and queen of f2, it is much worse than, for example, it was with the king on g2 and queen of f1, especially since in the meantime we have also brought the rook into the attack, and we are simply devastating. So one simple rule of thumb when you are judging attacks like this, and this is what Kasparov always used to do, you can cut the board in half and cut how many pieces are on one hand side and on the other hand side. So if you take a look at the numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 black pieces are kind of participating in the attack, whereas nominally half, 1, 2 white pieces, 2.5 white pieces are participating into the defense. So there is no denying that black's attack should be successful. And here, white played king to g1, rook to g1, trying to exchange some pieces, but giving up the third pawn, which was very difficult to defend anyway with bishop to h3. And now black not only has 3 pawns for the piece, which is nominally of sufficient material compensation, but the attack is still going. And now I will go a little bit faster to the next phase, because after king e1, knight g4 happened. Usually you don't want to necessarily exchange the attackers, but yeah, once again, here you are not even nominally that material down, and it is kind of beneficial, for example, to exchange this strong defender, so one of the defending pieces, bishop on e2, because after bishop g4, we still kind of have 4 pieces able to create threats, and most importantly, we are slowly starting to make way for the push of our kingside pawns. So now this is a very typical result of, for example, a successful attack. You get some concessions, you restore your material, and then you don't even need to win by attacking or by mating the king. You can also win on position, so to speak. So in the next phase, after knight e2, queen e7, knight f4, rook h6, bishop c3, g5, black slowly starts advancing the kingside pawn majority. You can see that we have 2 passed pawns, and also this f pawn will very quickly come to f4. And objectively, this is totally hopeless for white. By modern standards, I wouldn't be surprised if modern grandmasters like maybe already even resigned here. It's really truly bad position for white. And because not only are they not nominally material up, but also all our pieces are still extremely active. This bishop is still passive, this knight is still passive, this rook haven't moved, and yeah, we don't even need this rook yet, although we can also activate it via the b file, which is why maybe it was not even good for white to open the b file earlier. And after like knight to e2, rook f6, queen g2, now even rook f3 comes, attacking the e3 pawn and emphasizing the fact that knight f3 is impossible due to e takes f3, winning even more material. And after knight to f1, rook b8 coming, so black is not in a hurry at all, and as they say, bring all the boys to the party. Steinitz includes the last piece into the attack. And after king to d2, f5 comes. Now finally comes the march of the little f pawn. And after a5, by the way, this is totally aimless, like Zukertort was clearly, it's very, very difficult to find moves for white. F4, rook h1, queen f7, rook e1, takes on e3, knight takes e3, and now finally rook f2. And yeah, the queen is almost trapped. Queen f3 might come next, so Zukertort tried queen to f2, which is pure desperation. But after queen to f2, knight g4, bishop f4, white already, so black is already has like a queen and 3 pawns for and for a piece and a rook. And once again, all the white pieces are still atrocious. And the game concluded quickly after king c2, h4. Note, by the way, that this doesn't win a rook, rook h8, because this rook is protected by the bishop. So bishop to d2, e3, bishop c1, queen g2, king c3, king d7. The king is going to f5, where it will be perfectly safe. Rook h7, king h6, rook h6, king f5, bishop e3, bishop e3, rook f1, bishop f4. Yeah, here finally Zukertort decided to resign. I mean, by the way, this was the last trick. Queen to f1, knight g3. Although even here it's not entirely clear how much of an improvement this is for white. So yeah, this was an extremely convincing performance by Steinitz, and not the best effort from Zukertort. Steinitz managed to grab the lead, and yeah, if we have to like go back and pinpoint the moment where Zukertort went wrong, I think we could go already early in the opening, because this whole conception with b4 c5, that's like something you see nowadays on the club level. People kind of don't understand that this mindless grabbing of the space on the queen side is not so significant, precisely because of this thematic pawn break. And now and once that this e4 happened and h5, this was already pretty bad for white, and the game went from bad to worse from this point. Even if we account for this small inaccuracy by Steinitz that happened on move 18, where he played bishop c7. Once again, these inaccuracies are possible to uncover only, you know, with the modern engines, but we shouldn't judge these players too hard on the basis of these evaluations. And also, yeah, overall it was a very deserved and very convincing performance by Steinitz. So this brings me to the conclusion of this video. In the very next video, we will take a look at the game 2 and continue the series and our explorations of this fascinating match. As I have promised earlier, the PGN of this game, and actually of all games from the match with my analysis, is available in a witches study and also for download as a PGN on my blog. You can find both links below the video. If you are interested, feel free to check some other videos on the channel, and if you like them, maybe you can consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. But if not, I would like to thank you for watching this video and looking forward to seeing you in the very next one. Thank you and bye bye.